Hi, everybody. It's Mike Cosgrove with Pro Concepts. This is our number 20 podcast. And I've got a couple of awesome people with me today. One of my favorite staff folks that I get to work with is Donna Stempien. Hi, Donna.
Hi.
How are you?
Good.
Good.
Happy to be here.
So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I have 3 sometimes fantastic children and 1 large dog. And
Is the dog good or bad?
He's actually very good.
Better than the kids?
Yeah, and better than the kids actually most times. So, and then I have a fantastic husband also named Mike.
Amazing.
And I know.
Mikes are good.
I know. So we've been married for 23 years. So
Wow.
He has the patience of a saint, I feel like, if he can put up with me. So, have been back at Professional Concepts for a couple years now, and it's funny because I feel like somehow I never left.
Yeah. So you left a decade ago?
Yeah.
Because you were expecting your third baby, I think.
No, I actually left when my oldest was in kindergarten.
Oh, okay.
And wanted to do something that was a little bit closer to home back when you actually had to be physically in the office and we were still getting paper policies and, changes through the mail. So
Mike was a little old school. Like, everybody's got to be in the office.
Well, to be fair, that was, 2004
Sure.
and everyone everywhere was in the office. That was, so far pre-pandemic that it was
Sure
a different lifetime ago, it feels like. So,
yeah. Well, we could not be happier that you're back.
Me too.
Donna and I have always stayed in contact because I'm like, when are you coming back? And it took like a decade, but anyways,
Right,
here she is. So, and at PCIA, you work with which clients?
Law firms and CPA firms.
Awesome.
Yep. And a couple tech firms kind of mixed in there, and some of our other kind of referral business that's a little bit more general insurance, but my focus is really law firms and CPAs.
Awesome.
I
Fantastic.
handled the best clients for our agency. So.
Sure. Awesome. So talking about best, we have our fantastic CPA professional liability carrier, Camico, and we've worked with Camico for a long time. Decades now, but a premier carrier, the premier carrier in the United States. And so we've got Rich Bacher with us from Camico. He's actually joining us remotely. Hi, Rich.
Hey, Mike. I appreciate you having me. I think I stalk your podcast, and I always tell you how much I love the job you guys do. And I think that's probably one of the reasons you have me on today. So I definitely appreciate being here. And if there's one lesson that goes out to the group today, it probably is stalk the podcaster and maybe you get on the podcast.
Wow. Well, there you go. So I don't know if I asked you before, but I noticed in your background, you've got a license plate Bacher, which is your last name. What's the story behind that?
Yeah, it's a pretty awesome gift I got. One of my neighbors who unfortunately moved to Atlanta for work. I'm actually in Lake Mary, Florida, so I'm a little north of Orlando. Had a great neighbor for a couple years here who did a lot of woodwork, his own work in his shop. And he used to collect license plates, and he actually ended up chopping up the license plates and creating these gifts for different people with their last names and the letters on there. So it's a good icebreaker on the back of the wall there whenever I'm on video calls. So it's a memory of him too. And I got to see him this weekend. He visited with his family from Atlanta, so it was nice to get to see him again, coincidentally.
Oh, nice, awesome. So tell us a little bit about. First, tell us personally about your personal background in that, and then maybe then share with us some background on Camico. And by the way, one thing I should have mentioned at the beginning of this podcast is going to be geared specifically for our CPA type clients, accounting firms, that type of thing. So it is going to be geared that direction for any of those of you that are tuning in, kind of a thing. So, but Rich, tell us some things about you personally.
So I'm originally from Philadelphia, if the accent didn't give it away. So my wife Antoinette and I have been married almost 15 years now, and we both moved from Philadelphia down here to Lake Mary, Florida, north of Orlando in 2016. We have 2 cats that keep us quite busy. We've had them for over 12 years now. Wow. I've been with Camico since 2018. So I started my insurance career a long time ago, back in 2003. Started with a small agency doing homeowners auto insurance. Started off in customer service, eventually moved to sales about a year after that, and then moved into professional liability, first for physicians and doctors, and then eventually into the CPA realm. This was with a competitor of Camico at the time. Spent about 7 years in that program, and competing against Camico, you learn a lot about your competitors, more though than you know about yourself. learning about Camico from afar, thought they were a great company, reached out to them proactively, and have been with the company since 2018. So now my role with Camico, I get to work with a lot of our great agents like you, Donna, and PCIA. So it's been a great experience so far.
Thank you, Rich. I appreciate that, definitely. So we're going to talk today about the 6 things every CPA firm should be thinking about and know about in 2024. So that's going to be the gist of our conversation today. But before I do that, I want to talk about everyone's favorite book. I always like to ask my guests their favorite book. So Don, I'm going to let you go first. What's your favorite book of all times? And it could be whatever you want.
I feel like my favorite book of all time kind of changes as I change.
As we get older?
As we get older. So I am an avid reader. I actually really, really love to read.
Sure.
And my current favorite book of all time is a book by Leanne Moriarty called What Alice Forgot. And it is, I don't want to give it all away, but Leanne Moriarty is a fantastic author. If anyone's out there looking for, summer books to put on their summer read list.
I'm waiting for spring, but you're going right to summer.
I'm going right to summer. What Alice Forgot is the story is really there's this lady, Alice, and she falls off her elliptical at the gym. She hits her head and forgets where she is, basically. She loses 10 years of her life. And so the rest of the story is about her trying to figure out how she got here 10 years later. You know, her relationship with her sister. How is it we don't talk anymore? Her husband, who was the love of her life, they are now divorced. And it's really interesting to kind of think about what has changed about you in your life in those 10 years and kind of gives you a chance to sit back and reflect. And it's just really well written. It's very fun.
Wow.
So I would highly recommend 10 out of 10 for people who are looking for a real good, it's a fun, easy read, but just a fantastic story. She's a fantastic author and storyteller.
So I thought of something as you were sharing your favorite book, because I think your book kind of leans into it. So Donna is how do we say it? Musician?
Yeah. So I came into insurance after getting a music degree from Western Michigan University. So I feel like I learned after I got this degree that if I wanted to pay for things like food, housing, life, I needed to get a job. And so it was kind of funny. I started out in insurance by taking a temp job, actually. Yeah. And it was just one of those things that kind of stuck. I actually really like insurance because it's very logical.
Yes.
And I really like professional liability because it has the broadest policy form. And so it makes our job a little bit easier.
Nice.
And we have great clients, so that always helps too.
Yeah.
So
awesome. All right, Rich, you're up. What's your favorite book?
So much like Donna, I would say, times change. So when I was younger, I read a lot of different types of books. I liked Stephen King. I loved Stephen King growing up. I like all his books, all of his movies, great writer. And I would say the books are generally much better than the movies, actually, if you get into them. But as you get older, you start to read books that maybe, give you advice, guidance, things that can help you both in business and life. And those are my favorite type of books, the ones that you can use the guidance, not only in business, but also life. One of my favorite books that I've ever read, and it was probably a year ago when I last read it, is called Never Split the Difference. It is a book by a gentleman by the name of Chris Voss, who was a former FBI agent specializing in negotiation. So the book is, of course, about negotiation. And within the book, there's a lot of different topics. One of them is empathy. And Chris Voss really goes into empathy. If you look up the definition of empathy in a dictionary or Merriam-Webster, you're going to find a pretty wordy, fancy definition of it. The way Chris Voss defines it is basically becoming completely aware of someone else's perspective. So I think just that alone, empathy is something that is needed today more than ever, but has always been needed, because if you can put yourself in someone else's shoes, truly put yourself in someone else's shoes, and they do the same, there's really no resolution you can't reach. That's like immediately compromising. Now, how great would the world be if everyone, felt empathy for each other? One of the many lessons in the book, but I think it's a book that you can use in your relationships with people, your spouse, your partner, your friends, also, of course, in business. One of the points he makes in there is that, and I'm going to read it actually word for word just to make sure I get it right, but he says, the beauty of empathy is that it doesn't demand that you agree with the other person's ideas. So you can totally disagree with another person, but still empathize with them. And I think there's some great lessons in there for life and business. And it's just a fantastic book by who I think is a fantastic person too. I've seen some of his TED Talks and other things. So he's a very good speaker with a great voice.
Awesome. That's a book I have not heard of before. So that's amazing. Thank you.
That's good, Mike. I'm glad I could show you something.
All right. So we're talking about the 6 things every CPA firm should be thinking about in 2024. So Rich, you want to kick us off with your first one?
Yeah. So the big topic in the last, I would say 8 months or so, really 6 months, but I say 8 months because Camico first issued its guidance and advice around this 8 months ago, is CTA and BOI. CTA is the Corporate Transparency Act. BOI is the Beneficial Ownership Information Reporting. I'm not going to go in details about what the actual work is because honestly, the CPAs listening to this right now, they already know because they have been asked by their clients about these services. What I did want to speak to was the professional liability aspect of this. So we issued our first guidance back in July around it, and our advice was tread lightly. It's a new service that you're going to be asked by your clients to do. Just make sure you speak to your loss prevention folks, make sure you speak to your insurance agent, get some advice and guidance around it. What we quickly got after that was a lot of questions, and the questions were really geared towards, does my policy cover me for these services? And the funny thing is, underwriters, a statement that an underwriter always says, and we like to use as well, is the policy speaks for itself. When we say the policy speaks for itself, what we mean is the policy is the contract between you and the carrier. And the things in that policy speak to coverage. So in our policy with a broad, and Donna mentioned this about, having a broad policy and a broad definition of professional services, which we do, basically, if it's not specifically excluded, generally it's going to be covered under our policy. So from the get-go, the CTA BOI work, in my mind, reading our policy, was going to be covered. There wasn't going to be a coverage issue. The problem became when there was discussion about states possibly deeming this to be a practice of law. Now, if a state were to deem the work to be a practice of law, a CPA doing it would then be essentially the unlawful practice of law, which would trigger an exclusion in the policy, which would cause a coverage issue. So that was the real challenge was this. And to this date, to my knowledge, no states have deemed this to be a practice of law. So therefore, not a coverage issue. Once we get past that, then you get into, well, what if a state deems this to be a practice of law next year? And I did the work this year. So what carriers have done now, Camico has, and I believe our competitors as well, some of them at least, they have pretty much come out and said, listen, if you do the work this year, the CTA, BOI type work, and next year it's deemed to be a practice of law, we're going to go back to when the service was actually provided and what the law was then. So in essence, there's no coverage issue. What I will say though, Mike, is just because it's covered doesn't necessarily mean you should do it. Meaning each firm has to look at every area of practice. And if you're comfortable with it, if there's coverage for it, if you're knowledgeable in it, I would say move forward. If there's something you're uncomfortable with, there's no coverage for, of course, maybe don't move forward. If there's something in between, the most important thing, and this will be a recurring theme today, is that speak to your insurance agent, speak to your program provider, get advice, get guidance, find out if it's covered, but also find out if it's something that you feel you're ready to do and you're comfortable doing. But that has been, I look at this CTA, BOI, and I say to myself, have we ever heard, and I've been working with CPAs exclusively for over 13 years now, what other topic has kind of hit this tone? And maybe the PPP stuff back when COVID started. But outside of that, we've been getting daily inquiries on this.
Sure. Perfect.
One thing that I did want to interject, because I've gotten a lot of questions from our firms, and CPA firms tend to talk to each other about issues they're facing. And there actually are some carriers out there, not Camico, because again, they tend to be the gold standard amongst insurance carriers. There are companies out there that have essentially drawn that line in the sand that said, we're not providing coverage with this. We're not waiting for any state to make a determination. it's just not going to be covered. And so that was a huge relief when we had that first discussion and we realized that Camico for the time being was going to provide coverage for any work for the CTA or BOI.
Yeah. Awesome. One of the things Rich mentioned was, I think you used the term guidance, which is some sort of a document that you put together, but I wanted to ask Donna, maybe share some of the resources that Camico makes available. You use the terminology gold standard. I've always said what I love about Camico is the majority of the folks out there are CPAs.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the folks, I think the majority of the folks at Camico that work for Camico, not only being CPAs, but still have their hand in private practice as well, brings just a whole different level of understanding and empathy, kind of going back to what, Rich's book, but empathy, if you will, for the clients, but maybe share some of the, high level things that Camico offers to their CPA clients.
So right off the bat, Camico was right out in front of this topic, providing sample wording for our firm's engagement letters and putting together some kind of white paper news pamphlets, basically kind of explaining the same thing that Rich did, which was tread lightly while there's no exclusion. Is this something that your firm really wants to engage in?
Right.
Not necessarily just because it's still in limbo, but is this something that your firm's going to generate enough money in?
Yes.
That's going to make it worth, having to update your engagement letter, having to update your own procedures, because I think one of the issues is that there is kind of like this time frame. And so now you're going to have to essentially track with our CPA firms, their clients that might potentially be having these name changes and change of ownership. And is that something that you really want to take on?
So what are some of the other services that Camico offers?
So Camico also provides seminars either in person or virtually, depending on how many members can attend.
Sure.
And they're eligible for CPE credits, which I think is fantastic. Their speakers know their stuff backwards and forwards, and they're so relatable, and they are able to explain things in a palatable way to where I feel like everyone comes away from those seminars feeling like they really learned something and it was time well spent.
Sure.
But if you are a Camico client, I feel like where they really shine is in their claim service.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you how pleased I have been with the claim response. When it gets directed to a claims handler or a claims specialist, they take it and run. And again, they're so knowledgeable. If I have a question, sometimes I'll think I'm getting the most random question. And if I call Camico, they already know, oh, yes, we do this all the time. I'm like, I've literally never had anyone ask this. But because they're so specialized and because they're so knowledgeable, they're such a great resource for me, I feel like, kind of in that CPA space, because it is ever changing. And our clients are getting requests from their clients for things that, business is changing, and I feel like CPAs are being asked to fill so many roles besides what the traditional CPA firm was expected to do 10 years ago.
Sure. So Rich, you want to piggyback on that? Anything else that you want to point out about Camico?
Yeah, so Donna, I appreciate, Mike, you better hold her tight. We might try to steal her over here from you, but
we got to stay friends, Rich. We got to stay friends.
No, absolutely. So great thoughts by Donna there on Camico. So what I'll tell you is the reason we're different, and everything that Donna said, how we got there, really is because of the company and how it was created. So Camico was founded in 1986. We still use this terminology today. It's still true today. It was true then. It was for CPAs, by CPAs, or by CPAs, for CPAs, depending on how you want to say it. We're very unique. We only focus on one profession, and that is CPAs. Most of our competitors, if not all of them, write different lines of business. They'll write lawyers, physicians, architects and engineers, other products. We focus on the CPA profession. And really what I talk about with agents and also firms is when you talk about dedication, a lot of our competitors use that word, and it's not untrue. Some of them are dedicated to the profession as well. But when you think about a level of dedication, if the CPA profession were to disappear tomorrow, what would happen to them? What would happen to Camico? And the truth of the matter is, many of them would still be in business. They would lose a book of business, but they would still carry on. Camico would close its doors if the CPA profession disappeared. So that level of dedication is high, and all of that kind of results in the things that Donna said, which is that expertise. When you call someone at Camico, whether it's a loss prevention representative, a claims representative, the situation that you're having, the question that you have, they've likely heard it before, and they may have heard it 100 times before. They may have heard it 1,000 times before. Some of the people we have been working with CPAs for over 20 years consecutively. So those things make us unique. They differentiate us from our competitors, and they equate to that value that Donna's speaking about with the loss prevention, the resources. All of that really goes back to how we were founded and who we are today as well, 37, 38 years later.
Awesome. All right. So number 1 was CTA BOI. How about number 2, Rich?
Well, kind of to go into carry off of what I said before in the CTA BOI discussion about going to your agent and going to your program carrier, you want to work with an expert. So, you can work with a general agent. There are agents, Main Street type agents, I would call them, that write a lot of different products. They might do your homeowners, they may do your business owners. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you're working as a professional, whatever your profession is, today we're talking to CPAs, you really want to be with an agent that understands your business. And the CTA BOI stuff is a perfect example of that. If you were to call a general agent and ask them if that's covered, they may not understand your professional liability policy the way someone like you do, Mike, or like Donna does. Working with an expert, someone who specifically focuses on your profession, knows your profession, understands the policy language, understands the competitors, the other policies, so they can actually help place you with the proper carrier that fits your needs best. As much as I would like to believe we're always the right fit for every firm, sometimes we're not. And, there's different reasons for that. But an agent that's an expert in what you're doing can help you find the right fit for you. And they can also help you with some of these questions. Certainly I encourage firms to contact Camico and ask us questions. But if you have an agent that you're working with that understands it, they may be able to answer it for you. So I would say, make sure you're working with an expert. Make sure you're working with someone, the agents get paid, everyone gets paid. So make them work for the money. It's if they're getting a commission from the carrier, make sure you're working with someone that understands what you're doing so they can add value on the insurance side for you.
Thank you, Rich.
The one thing I want to say too is that, no one in the midst of a claim has ever said, "I'm so glad I had the cheapest policy," or "I'm so glad."
That's a good one.
So the thing I think that Camico, I just want to hit that home again, is that their claim service is top notch. And when you are stuck in the middle of a claim that is, causing you sleepless nights, I mean, we've had some real doozies. And I think, wow, I don't know how this would have been if they would have been with, XYZ insurance company, to where they didn't have such a dedicated, resourceful, responsive, professional claims team. So just to throw that out there. Additionally, I think where Camico is a little bit different is because they are so committed to CPAs. For our firms that actually are unfortunate enough to have those large claims, they are treated very fairly after the fact by Camico. And I think that's something that, like the general insurance companies that, may have a CPA program, but they do all the other kinds of things where they're just in there to make a quick buck.
Sure.
Camico, because of their commitment, I feel like sticks behind those firms. And again, they are just treated a lot more fairly than with some other kind of generic insurance companies.
It's great points, Donna. It's Mike, going back to my history and where I came from and how I ended up at Camico. It's one of the reasons I came to Camico. I felt that from afar, that Camico was treating firms in that fashion. And I think that's important. There's some carriers, like Donna mentioned, that, if they experience a claim with a firm, they kind of non-renew it, upon the renewal date.
They'll get that reputation real quick, don't they? They can get a reputation from
It's tough. I mean, the way a firm would look at it and the way they should is, I've been with this carrier for 10 years. I've been paying a premium. I popped a claim. Sometimes it's not even, in our world, a significant claim. To them, of course it is, because every claim is. But, it's a tough pill to swallow when you're with the carrier for so long, you have a claim and you get non-renewed. Camico really tries to avoid that at all costs. I've seen it. And I've seen, firms leave Camico and come back a few years later because maybe they realize that, hey, I'm not getting, another issue here, service. If you call the carrier, are you getting somebody on the phone? I know when folks call Camico, they're getting someone on the phone. And then if they have to be transferred, it's very likely they're going to be transferred to a live person as well. So those type of things can make a big difference when there's anxiety in a situation, especially a potential claim situation. You want to get somebody on the phone fast. So I think it's one of the reasons. You might have said it to me before, Mike. I know some other agents have. It's like we like placing firms with you because we know how they're going to get treated. We know how you're going to handle them, and that affects your reputation. We understand that too, because if you are to place a firm with a carrier that doesn't handle something correctly or the way you would, that can reflect on your reputation. So it's the trust you put in us. We really do appreciate that.
Yeah.
I said that, Rich.
I'm telling you, Donna, I've always been a big Donna fan, but I'm a big Donna fan today.
Yeah. All right. And then third, I know we're going to talk about cyber. So cyber, that conversation's not going away, folks. And so for those folks out there that do not have cyber insurance, I'm telling you, you're playing with fire. The number one industries that are targeted from a cyber attack perspective are CPA firms, law firms, architects and engineers, which just happens to be all the types of firms that we work with. So professional service firms are the number one target in the cyberspace. As a firm, if you do not have multi-factor authentication, MFA, multi-factor authentication, if you don't have that in place, again, you're leaving the door open and windows open and that type of a thing into your world. I don't know, anything else, Rich, Donna, that you wanted to say in regards to cyber insurance?
Only that I just went to like a half-day seminar about cyber insurance. And when you hear from a cyber expert how easy and cheap people are mining information for those like cyber hacks, it is horrifying and terrifying. I honestly don't know how anyone's keeping their information safe. It's
Sure.
a constant barrage of people. I hear now like this new they're using AI, and so instead of in the olden days someone sitting trying to crack a passcode and after the 4,000th and 11th time,
Sure.
now they have these algorithms that are just running all these numbers, and because AI is doing it, you can do 10,000 of these simultaneously. And so it is really scary. So again, cyber, I kind of feel like it's a not if, but when.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
I think the proof is in our lives too, Mike and Donna. Like when I walk to the mailbox every day to get the mail, every few months I get a letter from someone, some business that I do business with, a healthcare provider. There's been a breach, and I get credit. I have credit monitoring right now with like 5 different companies because of these letters I received. So this is happening all the time. There's consistently breaches everywhere. CPAs, as you mentioned, Mike, prime candidate for this type of stuff because they have so much information that these criminals, these cyber criminals, we call them bad actors, that these people want to use to their advantage. So when I first started working with CPA firms, I would say maybe 1 out of every 10 purchased some kind of cyber insurance. Maybe they had an endorsement, maybe a standalone policy, which is a separate cyber policy away from your professional. Now it might be 9 out of 10 purchase something, or maybe 10 out of 10. Everyone is looking to cover their cyber exposure somewhere, which is great. And the endorsement is a good way to do it, adding on to your professional. But for a firm of a larger size, even mid-sized firms now, you probably want to consider a standalone. The standalone policies are going to have broader coverage, more resources to help you mitigate. Just like at Camico, we talk about loss prevention, trying to avoid a claim. You want to avoid a cyber claim. You want to avoid a breach. Resources, the right kind of training for your staff. Human error is the number one factor involved in some of these breaches. If you can avoid clicking on the wrong thing, we've all done it. Luckily, firewalls exist. I did it one time. Had a firm in Colorado I was working with. They emailed me something, looked like it was from them. I clicked on it. The firewall stopped me. that was a cyber criminal trying to get to me. And it looked so legitimate. And I am usually on top of this stuff. Even if you're fully aware, you still can make mistakes. So it's important to have things in place to avoid it from ever happening.
Moving on to number 4, Rich.
Well, mergers and acquisitions is
big topic anymore. Big topic.
Big topic. And I would say it's been a big topic for a long time. So when I say long time, 5, 6 years or so, I would say I started seeing an uptick in it. The pandemic accelerated it. So now what used to be, you know, mid-sized to larger firms buying up and merging in smaller firms, now you have large firms merging in other large firms. You also have some of those smaller firms getting eaten up. What this is doing is it's really shrinking the entire universe that we're looking at of CPA firms. If you get accounting today, I get a daily email. There is a merger acquisition note in there usually. I mean, these things are skyrocketing. So, buying, selling a firm, from a professional liability standpoint, strictly, you want to think about what we call tail coverage or extended reporting period coverage. So if you are a firm that's thinking about merging into another firm, being acquired, something you have to think about is what we call tail coverage. Now, your policy exists to cover claims that happen during the period that you're covered. If you are to cancel that policy, let's say on February 22nd today, the services you provide tomorrow wouldn't be covered, but that wouldn't matter to you because you're done providing service today if you're canceling your policy. However, you want those services that you provided yesterday and the day before and before that to be covered, of course. You need to consider tail and extended reporting period coverage. The person that's merging you in, they're probably going to require that you purchase this coverage, and you really should anyway. The thing I want to tell you is there's always a little bit of a sticker shock with this. The extended reporting period can be anywhere between 1.5 times your final premium to 2 times your final premium. So if you're paying, let's say, for example, $10,000 a year in coverage on that last year, you might be looking at a $15,000 to $20,000 pop straight, no split payments or anything. So you want to consider that in your negotiations if you're merging too. Sometimes you can have the buyer kind of work that into the contract. But either way, from a liability point of view, from a financial point of view, you want to think about that if you're considering being acquired or merging with another firm.
One thing I would say about the tail, and Rich, you used the term negotiation, is don't wait till the day before to call into your insurance agent and say, hey, I forgot to tell you we're merging in this 30 person firm. And we're going, signing all the documents tomorrow. And I realized I don't have a certificate of insurance because you hadn't said anything. So believe it or not, I actually had that happen. It's probably been 10 years ago. And I went, holy crap, what are we going to do to make this happen now? So yeah, as you're working through that, to Rich's point, just pull us in. We're happy to sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, something like that. But we just have a belief at our office that until we read it in the paper, or online these days, we're not saying a word about anything, but anyways, if to get some guidance from us and that on tail coverage versus picking up liabilities and all that good stuff, it's a confusing topic. And we have, I think right now I've got six wow. M&As happening literally at this before year end that we're already working on. So, all right. So M&A is number 4. Number 5 is, I know we talked about talent retention and recruiting.
Talent retention and recruiting, I know for our firms is a really hot topic. I think with the pandemic and kids maybe going to college for that first semester and coming back, they have seen a real downturn in young people going into accounting in general. Mm. And so I know a lot of the associations are working on ways to promote it in high schools and really to kind of explain to people that being a CPA can be a lot more fun than you think it is. And I know from going back to the mergers and acquisitions, I know a lot of the reasons why our firms are looking to sell or merge with another firm is because they do not have anyone in their firm to kind of come in and take the reins and take over because they're just having such a hard time finding, retaining, essentially grooming some of those younger CPAs into, being a principal, and then potentially, managing that firm and kind of taking over that leadership. Um, so it'll be really interesting to see what happens in the future. I know, unfortunately, that a lot of our firms have been searching for kind of offshore help for some of the more
Administrative tasks.
administrative
Sure.
tasks. So I kind of feel like, again, with the pandemic and everyone kind of being more comfortable working remotely, that has opened some avenues. But a good CPA is, again, their client's advocate, their advisor. They do so much more. So it really is dependent on that kind of personal touch, the face to face, the knowing their client's business, and really being able to offer those solutions, and more of a consultative approach to things. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out, and to see if they're able to get more young people interested in the area of public accounting.
Sure. Rich, anything else on that topic?
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly aware of it, Mike. I mean, for us especially, we've talked about this throughout, that we're a CPA focused organization. So we're not doing other professions. And I think this conversation probably started 10 years ago, if I had to say, when I first started hearing about less people getting the CPA license, less people going to school to be a CPA. So for us, it's a concern. I mean, and we're looking at it though, as though the leadership at firms is probably going to look a lot different in 10, 15, 20 years. You might have less CPAs in ownership of firms. Some firms now are bringing in partners that are tech guys, tech women, tech people.
Sure.
The firms are changing just as businesses are. So there's also firms now that are, getting bought up by private equity. So you could have business people, being the technical owners of a firm. They're not CPAs. They're just people with some money that wanted to purchase a business. So that changes the entire universe on our end too, with regards to CPAs. There's certainly been a struggle with talent. I think if you read the Accounting Today and the other reports coming out of the AICPA, that is one of the major concerns amongst firms, being able to hire and retain people. So it's an issue. I think it's an issue for a lot of businesses, though. I don't think it's just the CPA world. If you look around, a lot of businesses now are having trouble finding good people, or just people in general, people to fill the seats. So it's something we're well aware of, but I would argue that it really started, a few years back.
All right. And then number 6 is our last one, client advisory services, Rich.
CPAs are doing a lot of different things. The first topic we talked about was the CTA, BOI stuff. Not a traditional CPA function. I think when people think about CPAs traditionally, they mainly think about tax work. But CPAs are and have been much more than that. So the areas of practice that even traditionally CPAs have got into: audit, compilation, reviews, a lot of different things, but they are truly looked at now as advisors by some people. Clients of theirs are looking at them almost, I don't want to say business managers, but almost in that capacity where they're helping businesses thrive, survive, getting through COVID with the PPP stuff that I mentioned earlier. CPAs were looked at and relied upon for that. The CTA, BOI stuff was a natural, and that's why we had to discuss it, because it was a natural thing for clients to look at their CPA and say, hey, can you help me with this? So people are not looking at CPAs just for tax work. They're looking at CPAs for a lot of different things. And this is an opportunity for CPAs. And I know Barry Melanson from the AICPA had spoke out last year about the CTA BOI and said, hey, this is a revenue opportunity for CPAs. And it scared some of us, at the liability carriers, because we're like, hey, let's figure out the risk management around this. But the truth is, it is. And there's a lot of different areas of practice that are for CPAs where they can add those client advisory services to their overall fee for their clients, and they can make money doing it. So it's a great thing. Donna had mentioned that, CPAs aren't boring, and they're promoting it that way. It's true. There's a lot of different things that CPAs can do other than just tax work. There's a lot of things that CPAs do other than tax work.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that's our 6 top things CPA firms should be thinking about. So Donna, Rich, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. I hope you have me back again.
Absolutely. Keep doing great things over there at Camico, Rich. We appreciate you.
You do the same, Mike. You guys are awesome at PCI. I love you guys.
Thank you. All right. So if anyone wanted to get a hold of PCIA, our direct number is 800-969-4041, or you can email us. Our email, our website address is pciaonline.com, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much for joining.